So out of the many Harley Davidsons that I've ripped miles on throughout the years, there has been one that has stood far apart from the rest. Whether we're talking about performance, handling, or just legacy, there is one and only one, the Harley Davidson FXR. If you follow my channel, then you know that I'm coming correct with the truest iron in my garage. That being said, whether I'm ripping miles in the chaotic conditions of New York City, carving the mountain back roads, or even doing heavy bike trip miles, the FXR has gone above and beyond and remains to be my go-to Swiss Army bike in all conditions. Just the simple act of keeping these bikes running year after year is an absolute labor of love. And the very close-knit FXR community continues to grow and stand the test of time. So how is it that even 4 decades later, people still absolutely swear by these bikes? Well, there's many reasons, but I think I could boil it down to a few simple factors. You can find 20-page essays written about these factors that I listed, and from someone who has serious miles on the FXR platform, I could tell you that each one of these factors definitely comes into play to create an ungodly motorcycle that is known as the FXR. The common question that people often ask is, if this motorcycle was so amazing, why did they stop making it? Well, the answer to that is pretty simple, and like most things in this world, simply comes down to money. Back then, people weren't buying these bikes because they didn't look like, quote unquote, a true American cruiser. From start to finish, these bikes were also exceedingly costly to produce. Me saying this is going to hurt some feelings, but anyone who lives in both worlds knows that the Dyna is an inherently cheaper and inferior bike as compared to the FXR. It is what it is, I'm just being honest. So yeah, I wanted to make a video that could be helpful to both people who are intrigued by the FXR phenomenon as well as FXR owners. If you know me, then you know I excel in both crushing miles and breaking these bikes. But when it comes to building and technical maintenance, I'm far from an expert. However, hailing from New York City, I've had the fortune to be exposed to some true experts and FXR wizards, which brings me to none other than Sal Badfoot. I'm just going to go out and say that without Badfoot, I would not have a reliable, high-performance FXR in my garage. For every insane riddle of a problem that this bike has thrown my way throughout the past 5 years, Sal has always been there to concoct some amazing and genius solution. Beyond a content creator, at the end of the day, I'm a true biker, and having the respect and bike knowledge passed down to me from legends in my hometown such as Sal Badfoot and Peter Guns is simply invaluable. So without further ado, I know when to stay in my lane, so I'm going to pass it over to a true expert to walk us through some key aspects of the FXR life, ranging from good advice for beginners all the way down to the radical twin cam swaps and new chopper builds that are starting to hit the scene. Let's pass it over to Sal.
What's up, man? How's it going? My name's Sal. Everyone calls me Badfoot. This is my bike, and this is basically going to be a rundown on why you need to rip an FXR. I mean, for me, it's the best. And I don't want to say the best Harley you could have. It's probably one of the best motorcycles. People that aren't Harley people are like, oh, Harleys. And I kind of tell them all the time, yeah, bro, there isn't a Yamaha swap meet. Like, you can't just go on a Sunday and get all this stuff you need to fix your bike. You can't go online and get all this stuff you need to fix your bike. You know, Harley's got the #1 largest aftermarket out there for motorcycles compared to any of the others, you know. So I mean, and they're awesome bikes, you know. They stand the test of time. There's a reason that there's still guys ripping these bikes, and that's because they last. So this is my humble opinion. Why they're the best bikes is it's kind of like the Swiss Army of Harley, Swiss Army knife of Harleys, you know. You could buy a bagger and rip across the country on the highway, but then when you get in the city and start hitting potholes and have to split lanes and stuff like that, it's a nightmare. You know, a bike like this, you could put a set of throwover bags on or soft bags, a windshield or a small fairing and really have a real good tool for the job. You could do everything. They handle amazing, you know, the tight wheelbase, the weight. It's a total package when you're looking for a bike like this, you know. Yeah, I mean, all these other bikes do stuff good, but they don't do the other stuff good, you know. They might do one thing great, where an FXR does everything very, very well, you know. Carry a passenger very well, handle very well, good for city riding. Yeah, really are the total package type of, like I said, like Swiss Army knife of Harleys. Well, I mean, where do you start? Ideally, if I was going to go buy an FXR, what I would be looking for is like a 92 to 94. They're all good, 82 to 91, still good bikes, but really the 92, 3, and 4 bikes are great bikes. Then you have the 99 and the 2000, which those are also great bikes. But they're all good. The later bikes have some stuff, you know, like anything else. As time goes on, they right their wrongs. So they have a couple of the things that can be problematic or a pain in the alleviated. The early style transmission, the early style starter, they're geared better. So 94 and up, the primaries are geared better. So if you have a 94 and your buddy's got a 93 and these both are on stock bikes going the same speed down the highway, the 94 is going to have less RPM. The 99s and 2000s are geared even better. They got 65 tooth sprockets and 65 tooth belt pulley in the back, and all the compensator and primary stuff got more geared for the highway. So really, that's, if you just, as far as the bike, that's what I would look for. But the early stuff's good too, you know. It's really, what can you afford, you know, and how much money do you want to spend? And also, are you going to make this thing crazy, you know? If you're going to make this thing crazy, then it's probably better to just buy a cheap bike and tear it apart. But if you just want to ride, I would look for 92 and up. Like I said, some of the earlier bikes have some problems. Common things that could go wrong with these bikes is a very long list. And like I said previously, it really depends on what your bike, what model bike, what you got going on. You know, these early bikes got Timken wheel bearings in the wheels. So first thing you want to do is make sure the wheel bearings aren't blown. Guys get on these bikes all the time. They buy them, they take them down the road, and the wheel bearings haven't been serviced in years. You know, 2000 and up, they went to a sealed bearing, so to alleviate that problem. So that's a thing you definitely want to check when you got a bike. You know, oh, this looks great, but the bearings got no grease in them and ready to explode. Unless you get one of the R3s or R4s, FXRs have what's called a spring plate in the clutch, which is a disaster. That's actually why this bike's in the shop now. Spring plate went, tore up the actual clutch basket, so now the guy needs a clutch and a clutch basket. So if you got an R3 or an R4, that doesn't happen. So if you got an earlier, what would it be? Like, well, anything 90 and up, they have that spring plaque in the clutch. So what you do is you can convert it, which is what we're doing. They alleviate it, get rid of the spring plate. They just add an extra clutch plate, and you don't got that problem no more. Cylinder base gasket leaks. That's a big thing with Evos. You got to make sure. You could go look at a bike and it have a cylinder base gasket leak, and the guy goes, just needs a cylinder base gasket or a top end or whatever, right? Lots of times that cylinder base gasket is leaking because the stud that goes all the way through the cylinder and head is pulled out of the case. So what you want to do is, if it's on this side where the head bolts are accessible and the bike's got a good cylinder base leak and the guy's telling you, oh, you just need to do the top end, put a 12-point wrench on these head bolts and put a little weight on them and see if they're loose. Because if they're loose and that stud's pulling, that's a whole different bike than what you're about to buy. You could need engine cases or even a repair. It's no way around it is it cheap. Engine mounts. Lots of times guys get these bikes, they bring them in, they're like, I bought this bike, I thought it was going to ride great, and it rides like shit. These rubber mounts are supposed to be serviced like every 20, 25, 30,000 miles, you know? And there's also a time in that. So if you buy this 94 and the bike's got 4,000 miles on it, that doesn't mean because the bike's only got 4,000 miles that the motor mounts are good. You got to change them every couple years or every 20,000 miles, depending on how you ride. You know, and there's rocker box gaskets. Those are a thing, but that's just, you know, Evo era stuff. You could pull those apart and just re-gasket them and stuff. It's not a huge problem. Yeah, so that starter stuff changes all through 82 to 90. They had about 2 or 3 different versions, and the situation is the starter motor, jack shaft, and starter solenoid are all separate, and what happens is the earlier primaries have more holes in them. So anything with more holes, you got more of a chance to leak. So the primaries, like I said before, that's why the later model bikes are better. They don't have all that going on in the primaries. So you really got to address those seals, really make sure everything's done correctly, installed correctly. Like I tell everybody, it's in the book. Like if you buy a bike and you don't buy the owner's manual or a repair manual, you're that guy, you know? So buy the book before you even buy the bike. So when you get it, you know all these things, or watch videos like this, stuff like that. But the earlier primaries are an issue with leaks. Another thing with bikes is lots of times guys say, oh, your primary and your bike don't leak. This doesn't leak. And I'm like, all right, well, what are you doing? They tell me what they're doing. Lots of guys overfill everything. They overfill the transmission. They overfill their primary. They overfill the engine oil. You don't need to fill the primary up until it's pouring out of the cover. You don't need to fill the transmission up to exactly the fill line. You know, I leave all the fluids in my bike, not so much the engine oil, all a little low. The primary fluid, all you gotta do is get the clutch wet and keep the chain a little wet. You know, pan heads, early shovel heads, it dripped. You don't need much oil in there. Transmission oil, that's heavy gear lube. If you fill that right to the full mark and think you're doing great, oh my, it's perfect, exactly where it needs to be. That's 90 weight oil. When that stuff gets hot and thins out, it thins out and takes up more room. That's how guys blow out their main drive gear seal all the time. I pour the fluid out, it's overfilled. You know, so all these little things, really get the owner's manual, study it, know what you're doing. Don't just assume like this is good and that's good and then you make the bike a horror show. Because if you do all this stuff right, these bikes are fine. You can do every single thing you need to do with them. Like I said before, Swiss Army knife. It's like a Leatherman. This thing will do everything. The elephant in the room, twin cam swap. Yes, it doesn't need to be done, but it is kind of the jam when it comes to certain situations. So, yeah, let's get right into it. Why do you twin cam swap an FXR? All right, Evo Motor and Trans FXR. You need to do the oil pump. You need to pull the whole motor out. You can't get the oil pump out without pulling the motor. You can leave the shaft in there and it's a whole thing, but you know, that's just one of the things. These motors don't leak. They don't leak, I mean, everything leaks, but they don't leak like an Evo. You know, I mean, these tappet block covers on twin cams, anybody that's worked on them knows, you take this apart and you need to get this off, you need to whack this thing with a rubber mallet. Cylinder base gaskets, they don't have them, you know. That leak is long gone. They got an O-ring, they just don't leak. They bump the compression, so right off the bat, you got a faster motor. Is it a hot rod? No, but they do have more compression in them. You could do a drivetrain like this and have a 6th gear. Is it overdriven? No, but these late model drivetrains are geared very, very tall. So if you take a stock drivetrain, like we'll say like this is a 6-speed style, you know, 07 and up drivetrain, and you put in an FXR, this bike is going to go down the road, especially on the highway, way faster. Your top cruising speed is going to be way more. So that's some of the stuff. Trying to think what else. Yeah, the leaks are really not a thing with the twin cams like on the Evos. All right, and then so twin cam, doing a twin cam swap. You're ruining the bike, this, that, and the other thing. You're not. You know, because majority of these guys that are saying that, first of all, probably don't have an FXR. You know, they got some sort of, you know, issue, whatever, with their manhood and just aren't about it and don't know what the hell they're talking about, because you can put a twin cam in an FXR. You got we'll say it's a 92. You got a 92 FXR and you want to put a twin cam in there. You don't need to do anything to the bike except get the drivetrain and get an ignition module. That's all you need to do. Change a couple wires. The ignition unit's different. Twin cams use a crank position sensor. Evos have a module pickup in the cone. There's a dozen guys out there all sell an oil pan that's already notched for your cross member, so you don't need to cut the cross member. You don't need to cut the small cross member back here. You don't have to do that. If you get an early style twin cam, you don't even need to get the oil pan. You can take the oil pan off, not run it, keep your oil tank up here, and run your lines right to your motor. On the 6-speed style 07 and up drivetrains like this, the oil lines are internal. They passage through from the one case to the other down into the oil tank. So you got to get the notched oil pan. Some guys have done it. They've done milling and stuff and run lines, but really it's just easy to get the aftermarket oil pan that clears all your stuff. You got to change a plug on the speedo sensor, 5-speed, 6-speed work. You got to get an ignition module. Again, they use a crank position sensor. There's a couple different ways you can do with that. Couple guys make a harness that plugs everything in, your pressure sensor for your manifold and the crank position sensor and a few other things. And then there's another company that makes a standalone ignition that literally just plugs into the crank sensor. It gets power, and that's it. It's got a couple other wires if you want to run a tack. That's it. That's it. You're not destroying a bike. You don't got to do all this stuff. The speedo is mechanical. Your cable's going to go from your front wheel back up to your, still up to your speedometer. You don't need any of that stuff. Tachometer, the module has the wire. If you run some sort of other ignition, they have the diode that goes in that splits single fire ignition to dual fire, so your tach reads correctly. You don't got to do any of that stuff. Even the transmission swing arm. Oh, you got to put all of this. 02 and up, the hole for the pivot shaft in the transmission is 3/4. FXRs and earlier pre-02 baggers, it's 5/8 like an FXR. You don't gotta put the bagger swing arm on there. Matter of fact, I make a sleeve that you slide into the transmission case, and it reduces that hole that's in here where the shaft goes through. It reduces the back of this transmission from a 3/4 hole to 5/8. So if you got a whole bunch of nice stuff going on here, you got really nice 9-spoke wheels, your swing arm's real clean, you got a nice brake setup, you got a nice shock setup, and you don't want to change all of that because of the twin cam setup, all you do is put that sleeve in there, and that's it. Everything stays the same. The width on the transmissions in the back is the same. You do not have to run a bagger swing arm. So literally, all you have to do is get a drivetrain. If it's 02 and up, put the sleeve in there, get an ignition to run with the twin cam crank position sensor style. That's it. You can use your foot controls. You can use all of that stuff. The primary side, you need to do stuff. But again, like the oil pan, there's guys that make stuff. You can send your inner primary out to get milled, so you have the shaft that goes through, like a stock foot control. There's guys that make one that bolts on from the 99 to 06 style drivetrains, that bolts on where your inspection cover goes, and everything works off of that. I make one of those. That's what I have on my bike, on my bagger primary setup. And if you have a 6-speed and up, because there's no inspection there, I think it's FXR division has the primaries all ready to go. Inner and outer, you tell them you're doing a twin cam swap FXR, they send you the primaries, they already got the hole, they use all the stock stuff, works beautiful. You know, or you can send them out and there's guys that do it. You know, send them your inner primary and outer primary and they machine it and put the shaft in there. But you don't need to do anything to the frame. You could take an FXR, put a twin cam in it, ride it for 10 years, take it all back out, put your Evo drivetrain in there, and 40 years from now when somebody finds this antique, they'll never know this thing had a twin cam in it. You do not got to cut anything. That's like I said, that's coming from the guy that probably don't know what he's talking about, probably don't have an FXR, probably don't even have a bike, you know. Rides a keyboard. So yeah, so as far as the back of the transmission with the 02 and up drivetrains, this is an FXR transmission, okay? It's got a 5/8 hole in it. This is your pivot shaft from an 02 and up drivetrain. This is 3/4. Obviously, not happening. It's not happening. So what happens is, there's a couple things you can do. You can drill this out, have it machined out. You can drill this to 3/4 and just put this right through there, right? If you got an earlier and you want to run a bagger swing on. But if you're doing a twin cam swap and you have an 02 and up drivetrain, and you still got your FXR swing arm, and now this is 5/8, not 3/4, when you put it through the transmission, it's going to be all wobbly, okay? This sleeve is the same OD as a bagger swing arm. So basically what you do is you take this sleeve, you slide it in here on a 02 and up drivetrain, and then this would be 5/8, which the ID is the same as this. And that's it. It's just a spacer, it's just a sleeve. Put a little grease on it, slide it in there, it doesn't move, it doesn't spin, the swing arm has minimal movement, that's it. And it couldn't be more simpler, you know, you just put it in there, use the stuff you already got, and go. I make these. If you need them, hit me up through Instagram, Badfoot, and they're $60 shipped. And like I said, couldn't be simpler, you know, no crazy stuff going on. Literally, like I said, you slide this in the back of an 02 and up transmission, and you use your FXR with your 5/8 pivot shaft, FXR swing arm, all your stock stuff, and you're good to go. It's as simple as that. Right, so FXR chopper, this is another thing that's becoming a thing now. There's a couple different ways you can do it. This is how I do it. You know, every chef's got their own recipe. This is mine. Yeah, so there's a couple different ways you can do it. I'm really not going to get into exactly how I did it because, again, chef stuff, that'd be like me giving away my recipe, you know. But there's definitely a few ways to do it. But when you do these bikes like this, I mean, the only thing you're really lacking is the mileage. You know, you can't go 200 miles to a fuel tank because most likely you're going to have some sort of little hot rodded motor, and you're going to have some sort of small tank, and probably only be able to go like 100 miles. But that's the only downfall. Everything else, when I do these bikes, they're super jacked up off the ground. They got tons of ground clearance. There's tons of room to work on everything. They're super stripped down. Like this one we're doing, it's got a magneto. This bike's going to have 3 wires on it. The only thing hooked up to a battery is going to be the starter, a headlight, and a tail light. That's it. There's no gauges. There's no, you know, little lights. Nothing. Super, super simple. This is the type of bike that is, people say, oh, you built that bike's nice, this and that. Yeah, I'm building this bike, but bikes like this, look like this, they build themselves. This is, like, this bike looks like this because this is the way it needs to be. If you ride a lot, you'll understand what I'm talking about. You know, you can carry a very small bag of tools, and I mean, minus taking the crank out of the engine cases and taking the whole, you could take this whole bike apart. You know, it's super simple. An Allen key set, couple box wrenches, a ratchet, couple sockets. You can take this whole bike apart. Everything's super easy to work on. You don't got to move something to take the heads off. You don't got to prop something up to get this out. I remove everything, you know. There's no oil tank. We do the bag of oil. I do the bag of oil tank. Dyna cross member usually because the kickstands are way better than the FXR kickstands. With the stretch, you got tons of room. That's the thing, you know. I'm just tons of room to work on everything, and they're super stripped down. They weigh nothing. They handle great. That's another misconception. You know, guys are like, "Oh, you ruined this bike. It doesn't handle the same." It might have to handle the same, but unless the front end's really kicked out and the rake is extreme, it doesn't handle much different than a stock bike. Actually, my bike that I ride personally every day has less rake and probably handles better than a stock frame. So, you know, again, it's the same thing as before with the guys with the twin cams. Most of these guys, you know, they ride a keyboard. They don't know what they're talking about, you know, and they're just hating, you know. Like everyone says, oh, haters. Yeah, well, they're definitely out there. More of them just don't know what they're talking about. But this is you know, this is the jam. This is my thing. This is what I do. This is a Badfoot bike, you know, super stripped down, super light, handles good. Little bit of motor work because, again, these bikes are super light and stripped down. You don't need a 130 something inch motor, you know. 95 inch, even 80 inch with the right compression and heads is going to do everything you need to do, you know. It's if you know what you're doing, you don't need all of that other stuff, you know. So you know, again, like super light, super stripped down, easy to work on, and you can do anything with it. You know, people say, oh, you know, FXR, you know, just get a Road King or get a bagger. You know, half of these guys now that have baggers, they have it because their buddy has a bagger. They don't have it because they're crushing miles. And they're the same thing as the other stuff I said before. They're just repeating what somebody else told them. You can 100% crush miles on an FXR. It's like, you know, guys cross the country on scooters. You don't need a road glide to rip across the country, you know, like I said before. A good FXR, sorted out, with a nice set of throwover bags. I like soft bags, that's just me. A nice set of throwover bags and a windshield, that's all you need. You could ride that bike cross country. You could ride the back roads with it. You know, another thing too is like, I go down gravel roads a lot. Dirt roads, gravel roads, I mean, a lot. You know, I'll go down 30 miles worth of gravel road, no problem. It's not, you know, I'm not gonna freak out about it. I actually appreciate it. If you got a road glide and that bike weighs whatever it weighs, that bike's a lot harder to move around in the gravel than if you got an FXR that's, I'm not going to say half the weight, but a lot less. It's definitely a lot easier of a chore. Moto camping, you know, that's becoming a thing. A lot of guys want to go bike camping. A road glide is going to be a pain in the ass to take down a 10, 15 mile dirt road to the sick camp spot. You know, that's how I am. I camp in where there's nowhere. I don't camp like right there at the KOA where you get off the exit, you go 2 miles, and it's your camp spot. You know, you can do everything with these bikes. City riding, touring. They ride, you know, you put the right seat on, you could ride a passenger on these bikes hundreds of miles a day. You're good to go. You know, she's a keeper. Exhaust. You don't want the bike super loud. You know, some of these guys, these bikes are super loud. If you're going to do 12, 13 hours a day on the bike, you don't want it super loud. You don't want too big of a motor because then it's going to use up all your fuel. Like, I got a Sportster tank, but even a stock bike, you know, I got a buddy who's got a 124 and an FXR, and he gets like, I think about 100 miles to a tank, and that's with a stock tank bike. You know, so really you get one of these bikes, make it comfortable. That's the biggest thing. You don't want it super loud. You want the bars. Don't get the bars that you see that this guy's got the bars and he does this and that and like, oh, those are cool. No, get the bars that are comfortable for you. Tall, low, whatever it is. You know, don't get tall bars because everyone else got tall bars. You know, maybe your thing is like a 6-inch riser and a little bar. You know, maybe your thing is like a 12-inch riser and a Sportster bar. Seat, you know, some of these seats, make sure you get a seat that's comfortable. Don't get a seat that you like because the way it looks. Get a seat that you're going to be comfortable on. You know, everybody's different. Make sure you're comfortable. Because if you're comfortable, you can go forever, you know? I mean, you can ride this bike 1,000 miles in a day. It's not a problem. Yeah, so, I mean, I think we covered all the bases on these awesome bikes, you know? Really, the thing is, don't rush into it. Take your time. Find the right mechanic. If you're in the tri-state area, I'm out of Gowanus, Brooklyn. This is Vax Moto, Badfoot. Just call up. Let us know what you got going on. Most likely we can help you. We got customers that come from PA, New Jersey, Connecticut, all over the Northeast here. Just, you know, and if you're not in the area, obviously the Harley dealer is not going to work on your 90-something FXR. So find the indie shop that knows what they're doing. Don't, you know, go to the guy that's, you know, he does wheelies on an FXR, so he's the guy. No, you know, he might be the guy doing wheelies, but that doesn't make him a good mechanic, you know. Find the guys that are crushing miles on this thing, you know. Find the guy that, you know, rides this bike. You know, you don't want to go to the shop where the mechanic drives his truck to work every day, or his wife's Corolla. Find the guy that rides all the time, you know, 5 days a week to work, rain, sleet, or snow, does 1,000 miles every weekend, because that guy's bike's running, so obviously he can keep your bike running. You know, it's simple math, you know. And that's really it, you know. Or buy a Badfoot bike.
So that really covers a lot of different bases. I know there's a lot of people out there that don't have a Sal Badfoot in their neighborhood to drop this type of knowledge, and as we know, the typical dealership is not going to take your leaking FXR that's 4 decades old in. One of the benefits of modern times is you could access this type of knowledge readily through places like YouTube. For more information on all things FXR, check out Badfoot's very own YouTube channel linked in my description. If you have more pointed questions or you want to buy any of his custom FXR parts, he's also available on Instagram. So yeah, that's all we got for this one. Like I said, I really do hope this one was helpful. For all my real mile crushers out there, we do have new merch available over at outrideyourdemons.com. Ride true performance Harley Davidsons. Ride true FXRs. And on that, FXDLS Brooklyn is out.